Today, I'm delighted to introduce a new series of the DexFactor, where we sit down with some of the UK's leading founders. Today, my guest is Ali Afshar, co-founder and CEO of Mytos. Mytos are robotically producing human cells, which today is one of the largest challenges faced in biotech. Before founding Mytos, Ali studied physics at UCL. He then went on to complete a PhD at Imperial in printable inorganic photovoltaics. I got that wrong, didn't I?
Yeah, photovoltaics, solar cells.
Photovoltaics, thank you, aka solar panels. So, Ali, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me.
I'd love to hear a little bit in your own words about your background. Obviously, you studied at some great institutions and have then gone to found a business, but would love to understand before that, and what led you to where you are today?
Yeah, so I guess one thing is growing up, my dad was pretty into sci-fi, and he's quite a visionary. Like I remember when I was 8, saying to my dad, "Hey, I want to be a doctor one day," and him saying, "No, you should study genetic engineering." And at the time, no, I mean, this is a long time ago. This is like the late 90s. No one was really talking about it. And I remember going to the library as an 8-year-old and being like, "Do you have any books on genetic engineering?" And taking this very thin book out, which was like a high level about Genentech and the stuff they were doing to produce insulin. But yeah, so I think I grew up in a house where my dad was always thinking of crazy ideas that often seemed really crazy, and then like 10 years later was like, oh, actually wasn't that crazy. So yeah, that's always been a factor for both myself and my brother to be thinking of big ideas.
I can't imagine there were many kids asking for books like that at the local library, hey?
Probably not. So I was pretty fortunate to have that. And then I think I just remember being in my late teens and thinking, okay, well, if you want to change things in the world, make them better, you can either go down the politics route or you can kind of try and build a thing, like build a company. And I realized pretty quickly that building a company is very permissionless and you can get things done. Whereas if you go into like a political system, effectively nothing ever changes. Hopefully that's not the case, but like mostly that's the case. So I was pretty sure before I left school that what I wanted to do was try and start something. And then I remember during my undergrad in physics, I remember the first kind of entrepreneurial thing I did. I remember I was trying to revise one of my exams. I was using a ton of paper, making all my notes on paper. And I was like, this is crazy. Why is there nothing else that exists to solve this problem? I was like, right, I'm going to build an A4 ink reading and writing tablet. Couldn't get any of the parts. I remember trying to say, where do I even start? Calling up E-Ink, which is a Taiwanese company, and like basically just hammering through their phone directory until it landed on a person. And then eventually navigating my way through, convincing them to send me parts. In the end, I was at UCL at the time doing physics, managed to get final year students at Imperial to do it as part of their final year project. And Imperial was paying us £500 as well at the same time. We get to keep all the IP and all the development. And at the same time, I would do my university work and then come home and open books on Linux at midnight and try and figure out how to get the whole thing working myself as well. So that was kind of my first foray into it, realizing, if you have a vision, you can kind of bend the world a bit towards where you want to get done. And also it's inspiring for other people to want to jump on and help you. And that's what smart people enjoy doing as well. So that was a cool moment. I decided not to take that forward because the cogs were going to be too high and you'd never be able to compete with something like an iPad. So I decided to pause that, and then still had that bug at Imperial when I was doing my PhD. And I knew I wanted to start something. And so I wanted to be part of the society where people could create lab, people would build things and come and show them off. And so I went to the meeting to be involved in that. And at the same time, on the side, I'd been spending a lot of time in the lab during my PhD doing stuff by hand. I'd started building robots for myself with my hardware experience to save myself hours a day. So I went to that meeting. I guess as fate would have it, my co-founder Ignacio was also there because he similarly knew that he wanted to start something, and he similarly knew that if you helped to run that society, you'd have best access to the talent. I told him about, how I'm automating stuff in the lab. He was really into running hackathons. We decided to run a lab automation hackathon. Got 9 different teams from across Imperial who were doing manual things, put posters next to elevators, convinced a bunch of engineers to sign up to come and do effectively a hardware hackathon, which is a very rare thing to do as well. And this was a long time. This is, this back in the day when Imperial had a lot of competing interests. They were less entrepreneurial. They kept trying to shut us down. Like there was other societies trying to do things, and we ran a society, official society anyway. I remember we needed to use the official catering. We managed to convince my friend to just wheel food in every day. He was like a Michelin star chef, and he did really cheap food for us because he was a friend. We couldn't get a room. I managed to find someone who I could call from my Imperial desk phone, and he just agreed to put all the names on the list. And I remember one of the first days I sat down with Ignacio, he was like, "Cool, I've cold emailed someone at AstraZeneca, and we've got a call with this guy next week. He runs a 400-person team, and he's building a new campus, and he might sponsor it." And I was like, "What?" this guy's really good. So yeah, basically within 3 months of working together, we'd run this hackathon, realized we could both jump over loads of hard challenges and that we love working together. And, I'd message him at midnight, he'd reply at midnight. I was like, hey, this guy's on the same gear. And out of the end of it as well, realized that automating stuff for the lab was super valuable. And so the first thing we did after that, we shout to all these huge companies, people like GSK, AstraZeneca, Pfizer, asked them what's the number one process you want automated. And everyone just kept saying cells. Scientists hate it, hours a day. They've got to come on the weekend. They're pretty bad at it. You can tell by looking at the cells on a microscope who's been growing them, which is crazy for data quality. Worst case, they're getting contaminations, losing weeks of time. Please automate this process. And that was kind of how we got into it and how we ended up working together. So we're very market first. And I guess just a little bit more of the story. We were 4 people in the basement, never grown cells before at that time. Ignacio reached out to 200 different companies, convinced a VP in the Bay Area to fly to London, sign a contract. That was our first deal. Then we got into YC and it happened to be around the corner from the customer and it kind of just went from there. Yeah.
Wow, that's unbelievable.
That's
what an amazing story. I mean, I have so many follow-up questions. Going back kind of like to the beginning there where you kind of always knew that you wanted to do something. And you said something really interesting there where you said like, when you realize that you can just do things, and you can bend the world to your kind of will. That's something that really resonated with me there. I'd love to expand on that a little bit more. Like, what do you mean by that? Like, one of my sort of reflections in working with so many founders over the years are they generally tend to be people that see, as you did with the paper notes, this is really annoying. Why hasn't somebody fixed this yet? And there's that kind of that spark in that moment. But I'd love to just hear a little bit more about that from you.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, it's interesting. I think one of the first times I really experienced something like this was I was at school. My Nokia phone broke, and I was really annoyed about it. And I kept sending it back, and they kept sending it back broken. And so I just found the CEO's email and messaged him. And then his EA called me and was like, "Hey, I work for the CEO. We're gonna send you some new parts. Gonna send you a new phone, all this kind of stuff." And I was like, "Hey, you can just do things like that and make big things happen." And that was like a soft experience of it. And then I remember also I would listen to it was something called like entrepreneurial thought leaders or something from Stanford. It was like back in the day, maybe 2012. I used to listen to that, and I also remember the first startup school that YC ever did. I listened to, and that was they had some incredible speakers like Sam Altman, Peter Thiel, etc. And then at the same time as well, the Steve Jobs biography came out. And I remember reading that and hearing his stories as well. Realizing, you can just call people up, ask for favors. People just help you if you ask for help. That's one thing. People like to work on something that is inspiring, a vision, and also the no you've already got in every situation. So you might as well ask people, hey, would you be able to do this?
Already got the no.
Yeah, I mean, like if in any situation, right? Like if you don't ask someone, would you be up for working on this together? The default is that they're not going to work on it with you. Or like if you don't ask, hey, do you want to buy this? So you might as well always kind of ask, even when things seem really low probability. And I'd say the other thing is if you don't have a big vision, it's kind of self-fulfilling, right? If you don't have the big vision, people don't give you the money to do the big vision, and people don't want to join you to work on the big vision. It's all self-fulfilling.
I always think of it as like the way you define a goal is really important, because the size of the goal you set, it's never going to get bigger.
100%.
Right? It's not that you're
100%.
going to set a small goal and then all of a sudden it's going to snowball into something amazing. It's like, no, you'll achieve that small goal.
100%. Right? And I also see vision as a vector, and like it needs to be pointed roughly in the right direction. And then as you go and you get more information, you can kind of like refine its direction. But like it needs to be directionally in the right direction, and you can kind of. And it's interesting as well because it's not like, say you build a car company. It's not a given that you would say, yeah, but I'm going to build a car company and then I'm going to turn it into a self-driving taxi fleet, and then I'm going to turn it into a company that makes like humanoid robots. It's not like that is the obvious vision to have. Like if you have vision, you can go from anywhere to anywhere. But it's not just like, oh yeah, obviously if you do a car company, the next thing you do is you do humanoid robots.
Vision's not static.
Exactly, it's not static, and it's not like it's not. I always think you can go from anywhere to anywhere. Like go from Google search to Waymo. It's not like it's not obvious.
Yeah,
so if you have vision, you can. Yeah, go on.
People think of it as being deterministic, right? I had a vision at the beginning, and then I executed a series of things, and then the vision became true. But actually, I had a general nose of where I wanted to go, the direction I thought things were moving, and I learned along the way. And I guess the thing is that historically you can always tell the story backwards, and it always seems to make a lot more sense.
Exactly. And there is something about this where it's, kind of inventing the future. I think Jensen, NVIDIA CEO Jensen, talks about it well, which is like, it's not like you just sit in a room and you think about it like, oh, in 5 years' time, this is what's going to happen. It's more like you have a prepared mind, and then the way he describes it, I think, is exactly right. If the apple falls from the tree, you can do a diving catch and catch it because you've got the prepared mind and you've kind of been reading around a lot of areas. So I think about it like that as well. And in our case, what's happened right now is we've been building this platform for manufacturing human cells. We've been live in some of the largest companies, mainly in the east and west coast of the US. They've loved using it and they've helped us make it really well, make the product really easy to use and really consistent. And now these types of cells, so cells made from stem cells like heart cells and brain cells, are starting to be used to replace cells that are damaged or lost in patients that cause certain diseases. Like if you have Parkinson's, you've lost a particular kind of neuron. There's 8 million people, no other cures today. Or if there's a kind of vision loss you get as you get older, 25 million people have it, you lose a kind of retinal cell, no other cure today. And over the last 12 months, these treatments have started to work. There's a combination of the science having made a lot of progress and the FDA getting comfortable. So, for example, first Parkinson's patient treated with neurons made from stem cells. A year later, it's like, the sludge has gone in my life, just come back from playing golf every day for a month, feel like I've rewound a decade. Or we've got multiple situations of people who are able to, after getting retinal cells put back, see multiple lines again extra on the optician's chart. It's like, or one lady who's like, I know I've not been able to see my husband's face in the center of my vision for the last few years, and now I can see it. So these treatments are starting to work. And so for us, I saw some of that data 12 months ago, and I came back to the team and I was like, right, it's happening. Now let's double down on that area. And so we're going all in on that space and trying to build out the manufacture of those treatments, because they need to get to hundreds of thousands of patients a year. And today it's one of the most manual processes in biotech, even worse than in R&D. You've got 2 people fully gowned up, very easy to mess up. And so all these companies are like, we don't know how we're going to scale it to hundreds of thousands of patients a year. And so that's why we're kind of doubling down on that space. And that's a really good example of, yeah, we always knew that, growing cells to replace lost cells was going to be a good market at some point and a real problem. But did we know that it was going to be last year? And did we know that Parkinson's was going to be the first area that worked really well? No. But we had the prepared mind, and then we saw the data and it was like, now it's time. Let's go. So that's how I think about it. Yeah.
What a compelling vision. Yeah, it's that's the sort of innovation and sort of change. It can actually change the degree of how we think about medicine, how we think about kind of aging in general.
For sure. And I think, the way I think about it is we are fundamentally made of cells, and yes, today, and cells are self-assembling as well. Like if you think about how a baby forms, it's not like there's a 3D printer in the womb, right? It's just the cells are put in an environment, the stem cells, and then they start self-assembling into structures based on the cells that are around them, the chemical environment, temperature environment, etc. We can do the same if we can get good enough control of conditions. Today we grow cells in 2D, but in theory, in the future, we should be able to grow like tissue, like skin, hair, and then eventually even entire organs. So it's inevitable that at some point in the next couple of decades, that's the way that things will go. You'll be growing replacement tissue and parts from your own cells. So yeah, that's what's coming.
There we go.
Again, I don't know when. I don't know if it will happen in like 10 years or if it'll take 20 years, but we're ready and we know that's where things are going to go. And I think we can help drive it as well by building some of the technology that helps even in the R&D case. Yeah, so
I'd love to
go for it.
I'd love to find out a little bit more. Like obviously, the mission that you guys are working on is really, really impressive, and it's one of those things that as you say, it's on the verge of sci-fi and sort of future tech, right? It's how do we think the future will be, and I think that's often an interesting place to think about the assumptions that we have about how things progress. For you right now, when you think about company building, when you think about Mytos, when you think about the organization, what are the biggest challenges that you have as a CEO? What are the things that you spend the most time thinking about generally?
Yeah. I know, Paddy, both of us share, we both share a big passion for finding the smartest people and trying to convince them to work together on things, and how valuable that is as part of building a company. When I think about some of the challenges, I guess as we expand into new areas, and we need new capabilities in house, and kind of spinning them out from a generous capability to like having a functional head, for example, something that maybe has been covered by a generalist before. I think something interesting, one of our advisors, Peter Reinhardt, so he previously founded a company called Segment, sold it for $4 billion. He's one of our investors. I remember him saying one of the things he learned as a second-time CEO is that he's happy not to learn everything before he hires someone to do it. And I think I'm trying to take that on board as we scale. And so when I think about challenges when we go to a new area, it's like, how do I as quickly as possible understand from some of the best people in that space what really good looks like, and then go find that person and give them the agency autonomy to do excellent in that space, rather than bottlenecking them by the rate at which I can become good at it first and then hand it over. So that's something I think about as we expand. I think we as a company have a very high bar for talent. And so it is just hard to find really smart people. And, candidly, it's not a place for everyone, right? We work long hours. We went to YC and then we moved the team back to London after that, but we kind of benchmarked the performance against what we saw from some of the best companies in the world based in SF. And so we work longer hours than maybe everyone else around us, and it's not for everyone. And we tell people that on the way in, but ultimately we want to create a place where people can do the best work of their careers, right? So a place where everyone knows that their colleagues are pushing as hard as they are. And ultimately, every day we can get these treatments to patients more quickly is saving people's lives. So we're doing it for the reason of the mission that we're driving for. So finding people who kind of match that, have a really smart, have a track record of solving really hard problems. Obviously, it's a high percentile of people, like the top percentiles of people, and that's hard to find. So finding great talent is always going to be a challenge.
And I guess like when you sort of take a step back, I mean, obviously, we're going to talk about talent and people challenges, but
Yeah.
People and talent challenges are obviously a huge component of what you think about as a founder and CEO. I guess, I mean, look, I'm biased here. I think actually pretty much everything boils down to that at some level. But I guess like, what are the other challenges that are top of mind for you? People, building the right capabilities, finding the right people to run those capabilities is one. What are the other top of mind things for you as a founder?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, there's always kind of a few different areas I think about as a founder. As main challenges. One is finding really smart people, as I mentioned. The other one is, and this is really applicable in deep tech, you go through periods where you're either clarity limited or resource limited. So clarity limited is like, I don't know even if I had tens of millions more, I don't know how I would spend it to go faster because we're figuring stuff out right now. Or resource limited, where I know exactly what I'd spend on, and the only reason we're not going faster is because we haven't raised a larger amount. I think in deep tech, a big part of moving fast is not just executing fast, but making sure you unlock more resource quickly in the points where you realize you're resource limited. So that's another one for me, is like making sure we're always pushing as fast as we can by unlocking that next round of funding when we know exactly how we'd spend it. I guess another one is making sure as a company, the product's always staying high quality and we're staying listening to customers. Something I've learned is that if you don't hold a high bar of product, things can go backwards because sometimes it's painful, right? Like every time you want to make a decision, maybe add a feature or we change a feature, there's going to be some compromises. So holding that high bar is always a challenge. And once people see that in the team, then they internalize it. And then the next times they've kind of got that mental model, but making sure everyone's always kind of going on that journey with you. I think those are the main ones. Yeah.
You've been a founder now at Mytos for how long? Must be
Probably like 8 years.
8 years. Okay,
Yeah.
so to sustain that level of intensity and that level of, work ethic, which I've seen firsthand from you. What are your strategies? How do you approach it? How do you maintain that level for such a long time?
It's a good question. There's a few things I think about. One is, and this is what drives us, especially in the moments where it's really tough, in the midst of a round, maybe a few years ago and getting a lot of no's, and how do you keep pushing? So in those moments, what I think about is if we didn't do this as a company right now, would it like definitely happen in the next, let's say 1, 2, 3 years? And the answer is no. And so that's why that keeps us pushing really hard, knowing that it matters, but it wouldn't like definitely happen if we weren't doing it. Another one is understanding areas where I get energy and areas where it takes energy away from me to work on them. And what I've found, which was surprising, and you must know this as well, is that the things that give one person energy are not the same as the things that give another person energy. And for me, it's roughly kind of 3 areas. One is talking to customers. Another one is doing hiring, especially talking to great people, obviously. And maybe a little bit of working with the team on technical challenges. So those are the kind of areas that give me energy, and making sure I work on those enough.
What are the areas that take it away from you? What are the things that, that kind of rob you of that energy, as you say?
Yeah, it's a good question. A lot of the kind of business ops side, I mean, I like the strategic side. I don't like, a lot of the kind of more administrative business ops side, which can really rob you of time if you're not careful as a founder. And over time as a founder as well, you realize there are infinite things you can do any day, and you have to be really judicious about cutting all the ones that aren't going to move the needle. So that's the other thing we're good at. But yeah, I think things like that. I mean, my co-founder Ignacio has unlimited energy for reaching out to customers, and that takes a lot of energy, all the reach outs, follow-ups, etc., pushing the sales process along. I don't enjoy that much stuff as much. I enjoy being on the meetings and trying to like strategize of, hey, how do we get from where we are to closing this and working with this customer. So that stuff takes energy away. Yeah, I think
How about the balance of like your work and your personal life, and how do you kind of find that? I don't want to use the word balance here because I think people throw it around, but like, how do you integrate these things together, and how do you maintain that you can maintain this high level of performance for such a long time?
Yeah. I think something you said to me when we first met, I don't know, yeah, this is talking about balance and how to maintain it. So I remember when we first met, I was pretty skeptical about people, because it was in the kind of, 2021, 2022 era. And maybe the people, it was very towards, just like, giving the team everything and, taking it really easy, especially in Europe. So I was skeptical when we met. And I remember at the time we had a challenge where some people in the team were like, we're pushing really hard all the time. It's tiring, etc. And I remember you saying, you just got to, whatever culture you choose, you just have to shine a light on it on the way in so that people will like opt into it. That was one, and that really stuck with me. But also the other thing you said is, if you think about the team like an engine, you can't redline it all the time, otherwise it'll overheat. I think about it the same for myself as well, which is like there are different aspects. There's working long hours. There's like high availability. So like if a customer sends an email like on a weekend, are we going to reply on that weekend, right? And then there's kind of sustained periods of pushing really hard to make a thing happen. I think what we don't do as a company, which is good, is just like always long hours just by default. We have everyone in the team's got very high availability. It's like if something happens on a Saturday and they also take a lot of ownership with the customer, they're gonna like jump on and fix it. And no one needs to tell them, and no one's to be like, cool, now you can have like, 2 days holiday, whatever. People just do that. And that's really important. It's probably more important than generally long hours. It's like availability being high. So you don't have to wait from like something happening on a Saturday to like figuring out on a Monday. And then the other part is if we have periods where we push really hard to make a thing happen, we make sure that we don't back to back that with another period where something really intense is happening. And we also make sure to pause and celebrate. And those are the kind of things that recharge the battery. And it's the same for me personally. And I think also the more time goes on, I think more of like, how Messi kind of like he'll walk some points of the game, and then suddenly he'll like turn on and sprint and try and push it in the goal when he sees a moment. I try and think more like that now as well, where it's like, how can you maximize your energy and like when to push the kind of nitrous button, and when you see an opportunity to like make a thing close and make something happen. And the more time goes on, the more experience you have, the more you can do that. And I see like sometimes the more experience you have, you can be like that, and then the other side of it is like more junior people in a team just have like more raw energy. And so the two complement together really well, is how I think about it.
That's really interesting. How would you advise me, Ali? I'm obviously very early on in this journey, and right now I would say we're probably in that red line category quite a lot of the time. And I'm now realizing, okay, I need to find a little bit of a more sustainable pattern. What advice would you give me?
I think it's really good to pick out like what are the one or two top goals that move the needle, and make sure that you're spending at least, a couple of hours, a few hours a day on those. Because otherwise the whole day can go and you're like, that's great, but we didn't actually work on the thing that we know is the most important thing to move the needle forward. That's one part. The other one I'd say is, I think if I was doing another company from the beginning again with everything I know, I'd have hired a chief of staff sooner. I think that's been an incredible lift. Really hard to find a great person, and currently we've got someone really great, and I think that gives a lot of lift. So finding someone, a good generalist who can give you a lot of lift and give you that headspace to work on the most important things. And also, obviously, if you hire smart people and you're obviously great at hiring people, giving them agency to run at things. And making sure like once you get them up the curve that they can own more, then it does enable you to have the more headspace to work on things that are kind of top goals for the company that otherwise wouldn't get worked on.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I'd love to dig in for you. Obviously, you've hired some great people, and you have an incredible bar over at Mytos. You really, really do. For you, and looking back across those years, what has been the difference between the good people and the really exceptional people? And is there maybe one or two that you can pick out as examples?
Yeah. And I've always enjoyed hiring, something I've always really enjoyed. I remember when I was first starting off trying to understand from the best hirers what they looked for. Like, Vinod Khosla, in his first 20 people, he had Eric Schmidt and also Satya Nadella, which is pretty crazy. And I think also one of the co-founders of NVIDIA was in his first 50 people or something like that, which is pretty crazy. Obviously, Elon's very good at hiring people. And that's like one of the things that maybe people don't notice. But the more you read his stories, the more you're like, okay, that was one of his big unlocks. And obviously Steve Jobs is another one. So I try to learn anything I could, any anecdotal stories people had, and just absorb all that information. For me, the top thing when I'm looking for someone is, do they have a track record of solving really hard challenges, or did they kind of, did they take a thing from where they came in and kind of bend it in a new and better direction? Like some examples I give you is things I heard in interviews where I was like, wow, this person's great. We had a junior once who, um, as a part of his fourth year project, was helping out a PhD group. Thought of an approach, tried it out, it worked, and then end up changing the direction of the entire PhD group. And you're like, wow, okay, that guy, we know that person's going to do well. Or there was someone who interned at Dyson before they joined us. On the references, the Dyson people were like, look, this guy made a new tool for the team. It's been so impactful, we've named it after him, and it's going to change the way our entire team works. And he set the bar for all future interns. And so when you hear those kind of things, you're like, hey, that person's like an instant yes, and they're going to be high impact.
And were you right?
Yeah, I mean, they played out. So I guess what I'm saying is like track record of having done exceptional things is the number one.
And those exceptional
indicator.
things, they can fall in any kind of area, right? It's not
they can fall in any kind of.
Yeah.
Exactly. It doesn't have to be technical. Exactly. It can be like, they took the initiative to unblock something that was super non-obvious how to unblock, that was impactful for an organization. So I think those are the things that kind of distinguish the great people. Because once you bring them in, you don't have to tell them what to do, and you don't have to tell them how to solve every challenge, and they're just going to run through walls for you. So that's like, those are the best people.
On the other side of it, nice. On the other side of it, when you think about the hires that haven't worked out for whatever reason, what have been, if there are, what have been the common traits, or what have been the common kind of maybe warning signs that that's what's happening?
Yeah. And obviously, I'm fortunate that I've had all the experience of making those mistakes now. I think one of the biggest mistakes we made was when we really liked someone, but there was a kind of like an amber flag in either the interviews or the references, and we thought we could change them, especially if they were someone who was not junior. And then it just played out exactly the same way as the failure mode that you either picked up on or was told about in the references. Those have been the worst ones. The other thing that I've seen really bad hires do, and this is more of a technical thing, but it can also be a non-technical thing, is they make a problem bigger. So like you look at a problem and you're like, okay, well, a smart person maybe would solve that in like 3 weeks. And then they kind of expand the scope of it to become a bigger problem. And we had a situation once where there was an engineer that had spent like 10 months trying to solve a problem. And in the end, I was like, hey, we need to exit this person. I put another engineer who's from a completely different discipline, who was this great first principles engineer, and they solved it in like 2 weeks. So there are people, so the worst is people whose kind of confidence is above their competence, and they're not willing to, be honest with themselves about what they know and don't know. And then they kind of expand out a problem, maybe try and solve it how it was solved in the past in a different place they work that was kind of irrelevant. And then suddenly, like a year down the line, you're like, how did this problem become such a big and long and hard to solve problem? And then you realize they just didn't see some simple way of fixing it.
So that's a good example. I guess when you think about hiring at Mytos, if there were individuals that wanted to join, I guess what advice would you give them? What would you say to somebody that's maybe listening to this and thinking about joining your company?
Yeah, for sure. Firstly, just to say, like, everything we've achieved has been because of the people we've hired, hands down. So I'm really grateful to the team, and continue to be very grateful to the team, and feel very privileged that we get to work with the people we work with. If someone's looking to join the team, I'd say come armed with stories of things you've worked with in the past. It's a place where we like giving people a lot of agency and autonomy to make decisions. So if you like that kind of environment, then it's for you. Even if people are junior in their career, and we've seen that work out great, and we've seen junior people grow very quickly. It is quite an intense place to work in terms of intensity of the work. So that's not for everyone. If you do want that, then we want to make it the best place you can do the work of your career. See, what else would I say? Obviously, our interview process is not perfect, and we might miss really great people. So it's kind of not a reflection on the individual if we don't end up hiring them. And I appreciate anyone who applies, gives us time.
Awesome. Ali, this has been an absolute tour de force. We would very much like to book you in for another episode at some point in the not too distant future. But thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Cheers, Paddy. And I'm very excited about what you guys are building.
Cheers. See you soon.
Take a seat.